Hey guys, so with the announcement of the Most Wanted list by Damon Stone, just wanted to do a quick video and talk about my opinion of this and where I think this means for the game going forward. So if you haven't seen this, this is the new meta we're talking about. So this list of 11 cards is now going to effectively cost like one more influence to put in your deck, because the way it's worded, it reduces your influence limit by one, and it can't go below one, which only really matters for like the professor, I guess. But in any event, the upshot is if you go on Meteor now and you make a new deck, it's going to show that the cards on this list are effectively costing you one more influence. So this noise deck now has to pay for Parasite, even though it's in faction. And the clone chip is on the list, so it also costs one more dot to splash. So whether it's in faction or not, you're losing one influence per copy of the card you put in here. So there's basically two ways this can go. One is to say, well, we're not going to play these cards anymore. We're going to play other cards instead. That's option A. And option B is to say, we're still going to play these cards because they're so good. We're just going to make sacrifices in other areas to compensate. So this is not a ban list. This is not saying you can't play these cards. It's not saying you'll never see these cards again. It's saying that including these cards now costs you a little more at the deck building step. And while some of these cards I don't think really need to be on there, like Yogg is not a huge problem for the game. Since Lotus Field came out, and even like Turing and the amount of toll booths, Yogg hasn't been a big thing. It can probably come off this list, and the thing with this list is it's just part of the tournament rules. So Damon can change this whenever he wants. If he wakes up tomorrow and decides Yogg is fine now, it's off the list, and there's no waiting for like a new cycle to come out or for new cards to be printed. He can make changes to the meta right away if he wants to, which is a lot of power, and I hope he uses it responsibly and doesn't just go around, smacking down every good deck by saying, oh, that deck won a tournament, it's too strong, I'm going to ban it. I really hope that Damon can be trusted to do things not that way, and we'll see how the game goes as we go. But I'm optimistic, cautiously, that he will not just willy-nilly ban everything that's good. He'll only really address things that have been going since a year or more, like Astro since the core set. It's never been not the best agenda in the game, and a lot of NBN decks would just put Astro in because why not, right? It's so good. It's a 3/2. It scores another agenda almost for free. So I don't have a problem with making NEH pay an extra influence because they have 17 anyway. So in a lot of cases, I think these changes are ones they would have made in the core set had they realized a little better about how the game works. So some people are going to be really upset about this. They're going to say, I'm going to quit the game, I'm going to sell my cards, Netrunner is ruined. In my opinion, it's not ruined. In my opinion, this doesn't even change all that much. This is fairly conservative, and you can still play these cards. It's not a ban list. So with that said, I'm going to go through few decks and talk about what they're going to look like, or what they could look like given these constraints we're under. So first off is Noise, because Noise has always been in a good spot, but clearly you're playing 3 influence for Parasites. You cannot cut Parasite. And this is what I mean about the two options. You can either cut these cards or you can cut other cards to make space. And in the case of Parasite, I don't think there's any way you can not play 3 Parasite and Noise. It's a virus, it's supplements your icebreakers, and it's just so strong with Data Sucker. So instead we're going to cut clone chips. And I feel kind of okay about this. You can play Deja Vu instead. I used to not play very many Deja Vus, but now I think you just put a couple more copies in. Retrieval Run even could be okay. It's probably not as good as Deja Vu because you can pull two viruses. So this is what I would play. It's just a real quick updated Noise build. I think you just cut 2 clone chips to make the influence and go about your life. It's not a huge deal. In fact, Noise could even get stronger as a result of this because some of the Corp decks are going to get hurt quite a bit by these changes. So it really affects the whole playing field, and you can't just look at a deck and say, oh, this deck lost 2 really good cards, now it's awful. That's simply not the case. It's more a case of, well, we're going to do a few tweaks to the deck, and the other decks are going to make a few tweaks, and in the end it's going to come out to be still a roughly similar meta with some winners and some losers. So I think that's totally fine as a basic change to noise. If you want to go more out there, you can try changing the console up. And that's the next place I would go, is that if you don't want to play Grimoire, then you can play Turntable instead. Turntable is a card that has always been good at hitting Astros, and Astro is not going away. People are still going to play 3 Astro in every yellow deck because it's that good. So if you want to, now that Clone Chip is gone or reduced, the Clot isn't as good because you can't just clone out a Clot and stop them. So what if you cut your Clots, which gives you 2 full deck slots, and play Turntable? Then you can put in, you've got slots to play whatever you want to play. More Econs, more Viruses, second Medium, completely up to you, but this kind of list is still going to play fine. There's nothing wrong with this kind of noise, and I think noise is going to be still a huge contender going forward. So some decks are just not affected at all by this change. So if, like this Apocalypse Max, similar build I'm playing to the one that was at Worlds, there's no cards in here that are affected. If you play Apocalypse, then you don't need to play Parasite, so that's taken care of. And because Architect is on the list, and I think Architect will get trimmed, at least for many NEH will trim Architect. And probably some HPs will trim 1 or 2 copies of Architect. I think Architect's a card that you don't necessarily need because Mimic is there all the time anyway. So I think you'll see less Architects, which makes Apocalypse even better, because you'll wipe all their ice and won't leave these Architects just sitting around to annoy you. So I think this is in a good spot. It's definitely a case where some of the decks that maybe weren't quite tier 1 are getting a little boost relative to the crowd. And that's pretty cool. So with Wizard, I think it's the same story as Noise. You can't not play Parasite. Parasite's just incredible. And same with Yogg. I think Yogg is really good if you have net ready eyes. This list is actually the one that has Ice Carver and net ready. So you're gonna take aim at these 5 power code gates and just plow through them for free, which is pretty great. So before you would have had Clone Chips, now you're going to have to play Deja and Retrieval Run in some combination. And it makes your injects a little worse, because you don't want to dump cards as much in the bin if you have a harder time getting them out of the bin. So maybe we'll click to draw a little bit more. In the end, not a deal breaker for this kind of Wizard deck. I would still be happy to play a deck like this in a tournament. So Bagbiter is pretty hard because Clone Chip hurts a lot, but the DDoS Echo Jack I've been playing recently, you can modify that and it's going to play fine. Play 1 Clone Chip, it's still enough to get your Hyperdrive or your Echo. I didn't find I was chipping a lot of false Echoes anyway. I managed to draw enough cards usually. So obviously the prepaid has to go. We're not going to play prepaid for 1 influence. We'll just play daily cast. It's 2 more to play, which kind of sucks, but overall you're still going to get a profit of 5, and that's 6 events to get a profit of 5 out of prepaid. So in the medium term, it's not that much worse. It's a little worse. And then the baby is like a prepaid, kind of, in that it makes $1 return. So I think this deck is in good shape too. You can still play it. Faust is not on the list. That's one card I thought might have been on the list because it does slot into many decks and let them avoid just having to spend a lot of cards and slots on icebreakers. Having like a good universal AI does affect the meta a lot. But I don't know if that's a bad thing. Some people hate it. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's really interesting against kill decks to have to figure out whether you can afford to trash cards out of your grip. So, and I also think it's cool to have decks that aren't just money and breakers. So if you have only 1 icebreaker in your deck, you have a lot more deck slots for toys. So I don't have a problem with Faust continuing to be a major player in the meta. I think it's fine. Geist is, I'm not sure what to do with Geist, to be honest. Now that Desperado is here, which I don't think really needed to be there overall. Like, it wasn't like Desperado was that exciting these days. But whatever, it's not the end of the world either. So you can cut a Clone Chip, because then that frees you up 3 influence. Now you got to figure out, like, are we going to cut more Clone Chips? Are we going to move to Forger? Forager changes the deck entirely, because with Forager you have your link built in, but you're losing a lot of econ. And Desperado works with Fall Guy, works with security testing if you wanted to play that in your Geist. With Forager, you almost want your levy a little more. So I could see a build where you play Forager in here to save your influence, so you can keep your clone chips. So if we play, 3 Foragers here. Whoops, not foraged. So 3 Forager is going to get you your console. You don't need your Dyson anymore. And maybe you want 1 in case you have to trash your Forager just to avoid tags, but let's say you don't for the time being. You can play 3 clone chips, and you got a slot which gives you basically whatever you want. Let's say you want to take your shutdown if you think it's going to use a big ice. So this is a fine deck. You can even play 2 clone chip and play the levy. I kind of feel like the levy is a bit of a crutch. And it's bad with the Street Peddler, because if you end up dubbing your levy, you get the same old thing, and then it's really expensive. So I don't know if you need levy in the end. You can also play an SMC here. But Clone Chip is really good in Geist because you get to trigger the Clone Chip trash effect, and then also get to trigger the, your spike effect or whatever. I think Geist is going to get good when the new cycle comes out, and I'm not going to worry too much about it for now until we see what's in Mumbad. And there's like Political Operative, there's that card that lets you trash it for 3 cards to draw 3. So I think Geist is in actually pretty good shape as far as criminals go. Some of the other criminals that really want Desperado, a little bit less so, because it sucks to pay influence for it. So the last runner I want to talk about is Kate, because Kate really, the traditional prepaid Kate is stone dead. You can't just play Lucky Finds anymore, because if you end up with something like this where you have 8 influence left, because you're losing 3 on prepaid, you're losing on clone, you're losing on lady, and on your parasite as well. So you can still do this without Lucky Find as a 3x. You got to find alternate money sources that aren't quite as good. So daily cast is again like not quite as good, but it's not in the list. So you can substitute Lucky Find for daily cast and still play prepaids. Maybe this is okay. I haven't tested this much yet. I mean, prepaid is still good with Test Run, Maker's Eye. You're probably going to play 2 Scavenge to avoid playing 2 ladies. You got to make some cuts, and that's going to hurt the deck overall. I think it's probably still quite good, but maybe the prepaid avenue is not that great anymore. And what you can look at is playing, for example, this is one by Kalimsha that looks quite good. So going to professional contacts and cutting the prepaid. So they both fulfill the same role of like a card that gives you money all game long. And then with the slots, you can play cards like Modded, which is good with RDI. So the Modded RDI is instead of Maker's Eye, because Maker's Eye without prepaid is fairly expensive. So you might as well just mod it in your RDIs and have them permanently, which is kind of cool. And the Tech Writer also triggers on the RDI. So you have some synergy here. I think a list like this that keeps Parasite, Data Sucker, and 3 Clone Chip is going to be well suited, especially if people start thinking that there's less Parasite or less Clot. This deck is still going to play these cards that are, easily recurable and have a big impact on the meta. Like if no one played Parasite anymore, you could still play Next Ice and it'd be really good. But I think we're going to see Noise still playing Parasite. We're going to see other Anarchs still playing Parasite, and we're going to see Kate still playing Parasite. So I'm not sure it really opens up that much space for low strength ice to take over at all. I think you're still going to see lists like this that have just kept the shell of what made prepaid so good and changed the econ engine a little bit. That's kind of the route I would take. And this is kind of the list I would be putting forward as the main thing to test. I mean, that said, you have other options for Kate. Kate's really just so flexible because her ID is this built-in econ, so you can put David in there if you want. The upside of David is that David's really good with Scavenge now, because you get to just, for free, reset your David, and then you can break all these Turings and toll boosts and stuff. So that's pretty cool. Scavenge good with Tech Writer as well, because you're reinstalling the program, get another trigger on your Tech Writer. And don't forget about Escher. Escher is a great card. Really good against Glaciers. You can just mess up all their ice in a really satisfying way. So I think this is another good take on Kate. Again, you see the modded RDI as being the multi-axis of choice. So it's changes like these that will affect the meta in subtle ways. So maybe your Crisium grids you had to stop Maker's Eye are not going to work anymore because of RDI, but maybe hardware trashing is a little better now because you can power shut down, or you can just use like Shadow Remain or something to blow up these RDIs, or Taurus. So cards that can interact with hardware could be getting a little boost. Something to think about when you're brewing, and there's definitely opportunities to brew here because you can make. So this is like a list by Alad, just 3 Apocalypse, and I like this list like Apocalypse. The idea being if Architect goes away or is less common, Apocalypse gets even more fun. You just wipe their board over and over again. Fun times. So lists like this with Apocalypse, I think is also fun to test. Maybe you don't need 3 of them. Maybe 2 is okay. But it's going to shake up what are the best decks. It doesn't destroy existing decks. It means you're going to have to alter them slightly. So I think that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of the runner side. One more Kate is the Nexus Kate. Security Nexus being pretty boss console, especially if NBN starts to try to play more Tracers instead of playing Architects in the Sentry slot. I think this has a lot of potential to be a house. A list like this doesn't need Clone Chip or Parasite. You can just manage to bypass things that are a huge problem for you. And you're going to have all this link and just walk through Gutenbergs. You can bypass Ravens or just kind of go through them. And once again, you're seeing modded RDI as being the thing to do in Kate. And the David Scavenge being another synergy you can play with. Modded Opus as well, we see here. You can use your modded to get your Opus set up. I mean, Opus is slow, and it kind of sucks that it's slow, but when you can turn that money directly into bypasses with Security Nexus, there could be something to it. So the trend we're seeing, I think, is that we're not going to cut our greatest cards. We're going to still play Lady because it's so good. Even at 1 influence, it's still so good. We're going to find ways to adjust the other cards that are the nice-to-haves and still make a deck that works somewhat similar to what we had before. So on the Corpse side, there's definitely a lot of impact on Astrobiotics, which I think was kind of the main idea. Like if you look at a deck like this, before it probably had maybe even all 5 of these cards together. So the biggest change I think we're going to see is that Architect is going to go away and EOI is going to go away. And we're going to play some of the big box ice that we've gotten in the latest Data and Destiny. So Turnpike, it's not Architect, but it costs less, and it's actually still $2 for Mimic to break through. So while it's less of a punishing face check, I think this card is fine to slot in and have a basic replacement. And the fact is NEH had too much influence in the first place. Like 17 is crazy. So if you want to spend 3 Sansan, 3 Astro, 3 NAPD, nothing really stops you. So you can still play 2 Biotics and have, you know, your in-faction ice, your neutral ice. And a deck like this is not necessarily any worse, and it could even be better if people are playing less Clone Ship to Clot, and then you have less issues chaining out. So this in no way kills Faster Biotics. I think he thought he would kill Faster Biotics more than it did. I think Lucas thought, oh yeah, Astrobiotics has been a thing for literally years. Let's take shots directly at their main cards that they play. And I think he thought it would kill Astrobiotics Stone Dead, and I think Astrobiotics is still tier 1 in the second meta. Like a list like this is not going to play that different. If you know how to play Astrobiotics, you can still play this. And because you had 17 influence, you can keep your essentials, you can keep all your power cards, and just change around the less exciting parts that weren't as important. The other avenues I see for Astrobiotics is to go for more of a sync-like thing where you're going with the Raven Gutenberg in the Sentry slot and making the runner care about tags. So lists like this, very similar to what we've been playing with Sync, Closed Accounts, Psycho, Fast Track. You can cut your NAPDs and play Kitty instead. So the Kitty's still a kind of agenda that protects itself and fulfills the same kind of role, and you can play Food for the same idea. So here we're saving her influence by playing Kitty and Food. Still going to play 3 Astro, 3 Sansan, and have basically same kind of deck. So Resistor in instead of Eli. Overall, like, it's a Lady token either way. So Resistor is really just a decent ice, and it has synergy with the whole tag punishment theme you can go in here. So I think you can still play NEH because you have so much influence. Play your pads if you want to, and still spam some assets and be fine. And then you can play the kind of Team Turtles, or at least Team Sponsorship as well. Again, if you just cut your out of faction ice, this is a little sketchy. I don't think Grim is that exciting, but if there's less clone ships, maybe it's okay because they can't get their stuff back as easily, or recur Sharpshooter. I don't know. I need to test this Grim. I'm not sure at all about this, but you can still play Team Sponsorship. It's only one influence. Cut your NAPDs for Explodapalooza. Same kind of idea. It doesn't protect itself, but at least you get a nice benefit when they score it, and it's still a 4-2 you can score. In some ways, this is actually better, like against Valencia. You don't want to have to worry about it being a 5-2. And maybe you can play 2 Sands and it's okay, because your sponsorship can bring it back if you need it. So I think this shakes the meta since we're going to be like looking around for what's the best list of NEH, but I think there is still a tier 1 NEH. I don't think it destroys the idea. So if you like NEH, like just don't worry about it. It's fine. I think we're going to see perhaps Sync becoming tier 1 because Sync was a deck that didn't need to play NAPD or Sansei necessarily to win. And this is the list I'm really excited about. I like Sync a lot, and I think these changes just helped it compared to other NEH decks quite a bit. Like not much is lost at all. We had some blue levels that have to go. Or you could cut the gift and archive and play them again. Like this 5 influence is kind of flex. But the thing is, like blue level was only replacing hedge fund anyway, so you can just like play hedge fund and draw a card, and it's not that different. Overall, I think this kind of deck is really strong. We might even see like more Film Critic to deal with this, or like even like a Data Dealer against News Team could happen if this becomes the big thing, which would be really interesting to see. But I think this kind of Sync deck has a great plan, and runners having to make sacrifices definitely helps us out. If there's less clone ships, killing your Data Ravens. If there's less clone ships, doing whatever, killing your Resistors. Then it's a benefit for you. So some decks that were kind of in the wings, like Bootcamp Glacier, has always been kind of close to tier 1. There's really not much loss here. You change your NAPD for like a Corporate War again, which is fine. It doesn't change that much. You're already on food. You're not playing any of these other cards that require influence, and suddenly the deck is pretty decent again. Like, because there's nothing really lost here in terms of influence mix. You still have your Adonis campaign. You can afford to keep your toll booths. Everything's fine. When you compare that to like what happens to food coats, which is more of a severe thing. So let's look at one food coats idea. So NAPDs were very often the 3 of, not really affordable anymore. Architect and Eli, not really affordable. So this list is going to say we're going to keep our good ice because it's hard to replace this stuff with good equivalents. We're just going to cut elsewhere. So down to 1 Caprice frees you up 4 influence. You can play more archived to get this back. You can play Team Sponsorship if you want to get this back. I don't know if 1 Caprice is really enough, but we'll see. Like the alternative is to go like cut all your Elis or all your architects, and that's kind of weird because this is still such a great early face check punish when you have your campaigns and you have your sysops. I mean, you still have 3 ash, right? So it's not like your servers are unprotected completely. I think this is one update you can go for food coats, and if Claudia comes out or gets reduced, then Biotic becomes an option to just close the game out. Like, there's pretty often that you have 7 credits, but you don't really want to score in your milk because it's really unsafe right now. Or you just want to end the game right away. And the Biotic can do that. Maybe 2 is too many, but it's a nice little card to have in the arsenal. So Blue Sun hurts less than the food camps, or sorry, food coats. Something I think we'll always see come up again is Next Ice. If people are gambling on Parasite being less of a thing, and Cloneship being less of a thing means Marcus Batty gets better. So you could try some stuff like this. I don't know if it's good or not, but you can definitely consider, like, what if we cut the Elis and we cut most of the Architects and just play Next Ice again, and we recur it with Architect or with Team Sponsorship or with Archived. Like, this kind of shell is still quite strong. And Breaker Bay gives you a strong econ to actually res your next gold, res your toll booth. I could see this being somewhat of a thing. Rototurret gains if there's less clone chip parasite. Because if they face check this, they have to get a breaker. They might not have a clone chip anymore, so before you'd just assume that they would always have clone chip on the table and just kill this rototurret right away. Now, maybe not the case all the time. Maybe only some of the time they have the clone chip available. So you can definitely try out next dice. I'm not saying it's going to be the best thing, but it's going to be an option. The other implication of less like parasite clone chip shenanigans is that these kind of like low strength Command and Tsurugi become a little better. And I wouldn't go all in on these because I still think there is going to be parasites in Kate, at least some Kates, and there's going to be parasites in Anarch, at least some Anarchs. But the clone chip parasite combo won't be on the board as often, so maybe you can come back to playing some of these low strength ice that used to die very easily. This kind of deck is still really solid. Food is a good addition to it. Lets you play 8 agendas with a Hades that always got stolen. The Hades was always kind of risky, but now there's no risk whatsoever to this food. Pretty cool. I mean, the Eli, this is maybe worth it to influence because it's just a solid ice. But you could look at playing Marcus instead of save influence. Marcus is definitely worse, but at least he punishes them face check, which is not nothing. So I think there's some brewing to be had with replicating perfection, even though it's not been seen as often recently. Genomics, like nothing really happened to this deck. You might have had one architect, but you can just play Archive Memories to get another Mushin back, and it's the same deck. Absolutely the same deck. So this definitely doesn't shake up the entire meta and make all good decks bad and vice versa. It's going to be more incremental. And I think in the end it's going to be fine. Gagarin, again, you have your NAPDs, but most things are not really affected. And if Parasite is less often, then Tour Guide gets better, right? This Tour Guide can live a little more often. He's still going to die most of the time, but easier to stick one, easier to recur them and have them stick on the recursion. So really, I think you should see this as an opportunity to try some different decks out. Maybe decks that were known to be not that great, but they were okay, and now they're just that little bit better, and you can try them and brew a little more again. Like Argus was never really a tier 1 deck, but Power Shutdown's a little better now with less clone chip. Maybe you can play this again and just go really fast. And then if you have the snares they're trying to dig you with Medium or Faust, you can punish them with the snare and be happy with that. Hard to say for sure. Shadow Remains could come in to deal with RDI a little better. People will run this most of the time because they're not that afraid of traps, so it will usually hit. Lists like this could be decent. So no NEPDs, no nothing here. You got your full 15 still available, and that's pretty cool. So I encourage you to not quit the game, to not rage about this, and not make a bigger deal out of it than it is. The fact is, good decks are still going to be good. Some less good decks are a little better, some are a little worse. You may have a pet deck that's now not very good anymore, and that's unfortunate, but other decks, you can brew and find one that's good now. So I'm cautiously optimistic, hoping Damon does a good job with this list. Doesn't change it too often, and doesn't make it much longer than it is, ideally. And we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching, guys.